Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well, I hope you're having a good week, and I hope you're ready for the French Grand Prix, because if it is anything like the 6 Grand Prix we've had before, it is going to be an absolute banger of a race. Although we know France can sometimes, let's just say sometimes, be a little bit boring. So let's hope that the French Grand Prix can follow suit and be an incredible race. Of course, I will be live all weekend for qualifying for the race. So if you haven't seen one of my live streams before, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when we're live, so we can chat Formula 1 whilst it is live and in front of us. But before then, I want to talk about another driver. If you haven't seen my video recently on Valtteri Bottas, I was basically explaining how I think Valtteri Bottas has come under some criticism this season, but I don't think it's really that warranted considering how unlucky he has been. And another driver who I think is in a similar sort of position is Daniel Ricciardo. I want to discuss Daniel Ricciardo because in a similar vein to Bottas, lots of people are coming under criticism for Daniel Ricciardo at the moment, and I'm not 100% sure that it is entirely warranted. If we look at how he's been doing this season so far, we can see that, his qualifying has been fairly good, and similarly, his race finishes, they've been in and amongst the points consistently. Take Monaco out of that, and he's finished in the points every single race. The problem is, though, he just doesn't seem to have that spark at the minute. He doesn't quite seem to know his way around the car, and if we just look at each one of the races individually, Bahrain, a 7th place finish, and after a little knock with Gasly, to be fair, and his first time driving a brand new car, I think we can let him off for that. I think he's done a pretty good job in getting that car into 7th place, brand new to the team, first weekend. I think we were all pretty happy with Daniel Ricciardo overall that weekend. Then we get to Imola. Obviously, it's a much trickier race for him. But again, he shows his poise, shows his prowess, and actually finishes 6th. Even though he did have that incident with Lando Norris, obviously letting Norris past, I think he took that on the chin. He understood that Norris that weekend was a little bit quicker than him, especially on the wet weather tyres that he'd never been on before in the McLaren car. You can't really blame him for that, in that, Norris, who's been there 3 years now, is much quicker in a car that, one, he knows inside out, and secondarily, he's driven in the wet before. And you know what? Daniel Ricciardo took that on the chin. He was a good team player. He let Norris pass, and he didn't really speak about it any more than that. Portugal was a little bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, didn't get out of Q3, ended up sort of languishing down in qualifying. But actually, I think he deserves some credit here. Again, 3rd race in a new team, brand new team. Had 1 race in the dry, 1 race in the wet. Now he's coming into this new race. And I think the only real thing that went wrong for him in the race is that he had that pit stop where he slightly overextended and nearly drove into, obviously, the Jack guy in front of him. But apart from that, finishing 9th place when starting 16th, I think he did a pretty good job all in all. Considering, as I said, new team, 2nd time driving in a proper race in dry conditions. And again, Spain, not really too much to talk about. A good start in 7th place, a good finish in 6th. Again, he has another good race, doesn't set the laps on fire. He's not burning any new rubber. He's not setting anyone alight with his pace. But I don't know, he just seemed to be good. And it helped, actually, in Spain that Norris had a pretty poor race and ended up finishing 9th and behind him. And I think people were thinking, Daniel Ricciardo finishes in front of Norris for the first time, shows maybe a little bit more pace than him in Spain. Is this going to be the start of something where Daniel Ricciardo is going to start to catch up Norris? And I thought that too. I thought moving into the Monaco weekend, I remember the qualifying of Monaco, I had Daniel Ricciardo as my surprise package. I put him in there as definitely getting into the top 10. I had him as my wild card. I was ready for him to really set the track alight when it came to Monaco. And Monaco in general, I think has been a bit of a turning point for lots and lots of these drivers. So if you look at Monaco, the 5th race in the season, it's where people like Carlos Sainz, Sebastian Vettel, Lando Norris, you could say, have really turned their season into something spectacular. They've really taken that step forward and shown they've got that excellent pace. It also could, you argue, that, Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, Daniel Ricciardo maybe it's the turning point for their season where it started to, show those little bits of cracks, show those signs of possibly not going the way that they were hoping to. After a good start, 4 races, Daniel Ricciardo moving into Monaco, a track that he loves, and it just doesn't click with him, does it? It just doesn't quite get there. He ends up starting 12th, finishing 12th in the Golf livery. Everyone was sort of ready for him to burst onto the McLaren scene. And Lando Norris picks up another podium. And again, I feel like Monaco is going to be this turning point for some drivers. We've seen some drivers take their result from Monaco and build on it in Baku. You could argue Gasly's done the same. He's taken that result in Monaco, built on it. Vettel taken that result in Monaco, built on it. And then you've got Ricciardo, Bottas, Hamilton. You could argue a few more down the grid. They have taken that result in Monaco that was maybe not the best. And then when it's come to Baku, it's been a repeat. Again, it's been another race where they haven't really showed up. And I think the main thing here was he started in 12th. 2 of the guys that were in front of him didn't actually finish the race, obviously, with Leclerc not even starting it. But he still finished 12th, and it was his first time outside of the points and a little bit tricky for him. Then we move on to Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan, again, as I said, Daniel Ricciardo hitting the wall in Q2. It's just something that we don't really see from him overly often. He's a really experienced driver, and it looked like the weekend was just going to fall apart from Q2. But actually, I want to talk about his persistence, his ideas. So he took that crash in Q2, and, some drivers would say that's an incredibly disappointing thing to happen, and they'd almost throw the weekend away from that qualifying. And I've seen in interviews recently, Daniel Ricciardo actually took this opportunity to really step his game up and try something new. So he's been said in interviews that he used that Baku Grand Prix as a real time to learn this car, as a real time to understand the ins and outs of this McLaren. He said in the simulator, he's tried stuff completely new. At Baku, he tried stuff completely new. He changed the internal setup, what he has in front of him, the wheel, how it works, what he's got in terms of the systems in front of him. He's completely changed that to try and see if he can find that little bit more pace and just even give himself an understanding of this new team. He's taken a step back and really looked at it from a different perspective. And that's what I think this is going to be the turning point now, back in the correct direction for Daniel Ricciardo. I think Daniel Ricciardo, if we look at those results, doesn't really deserve the criticism that he is getting. He's continually finishing inside the points. Yes, Monaco is an outlier there. Is he fighting for podiums? No. And I think the only reason we're really talking about Daniel Ricciardo possibly having a poor start to the season is this man here. Lando Norris has been electric. And the problem for Daniel Ricciardo is everyone is comparing him to Lando Norris. And when Daniel Ricciardo is quoted saying that he's not convinced he has as much pace as Norris, it sort of backs up people's preconceptions that they're building on him being worse than Norris, especially in this car, but also overall for the season. And we've seen Norris start the season well last year. We saw him start incredibly well compared to Carlos Sainz. He was much, much further ahead of Carlos Sainz in the standings by around this point in the season. But Carlos Sainz caught him. And I think that's a real defining factor. Can Daniel Ricciardo do the same as Carlos Sainz and catch Lando Norris this season? Yes, Lando Norris has another season of experience under his belt. Yes, Lando Norris is getting more podiums this season than he was last time around. But can Daniel Ricciardo turn it around? Let's actually look at the sort of side-by-side comparison. If we look through the Drivers' Championship, Norris up there in 4th place with 66 points and Daniel Ricciardo down in 10th. I think that's the only thing that people are really concerned about is that gap between the two. So if I look at the statistics, Lando Norris has finished an average position of 4.67, whereas the average position finish for Daniel Ricciardo has been 8.17. And obviously Daniel Ricciardo has only outperformed Lando Norris once in those 6 races. So for me, the real turning point for Daniel Ricciardo this season has to be getting another result ahead of Norris. Has to be taking over Vettel and Gasly. If he can get back in front of Vettel and Gasly, back into that top 8, where you'd expect him to be, looking at the constructors, McLaren are in the top 4, therefore you'd expect both of those drivers to be in the top 8. So if Daniel Ricciardo can get back in the top 8 and start to make a little bit of a gain on Lando Norris, I think we're seeing completely different stories being written about Daniel Ricciardo. I think we're seeing a completely different conception to Daniel Ricciardo. And as I said, those results are not bad. They're not bad results. He is continually in the points. He's just not setting the world alight. We need one performance from Daniel Ricciardo where we just stamps his authority, says, look, I've still got the pace. I'm still hungry for this. I'm still one of the best drivers on the grid, which I personally think he is. And in a similar vein to Bottas, as I was talking about beforehand, I think he's just been a little bit unlucky maybe, It just hasn't quite gone for him. Maybe the car hasn't been quite set up perfectly for him. Maybe he's not quite there with his confidence in the cornering yet. We've seen comparisons with him and Norris and the fact that Norris is braking so much later. Daniel Ricciardo is the latest of late breakers. And if he can get to that point again in this McLaren, I think he's going to start making ground on Norris. And I could see towards the end of the season, a Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris, both of them in the Drivers' Championship, possibly 4th, 5th, 6th, both of them fighting for that final position, trying to get one up on each other, trying to be the first McLaren driver in that Constructors' and Drivers' Championship. But I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, this is all about the discussion. Let me know, what do you think of Daniel Ricciardo's season so far? And how do you think he can improve moving on to the next races? Also, how do you think he's going to do in the French Grand Prix? I think this could be a turning point. I think we could see a vintage Daniel Ricciardo performance in France. He just turns up, turns it on, gets it all done. Classic Daniel Ricciardo, and gets the points in the bag for McLaren. Thank you so much for watching. Thank all of you. A ridiculous growth on the channel recently in terms of subscribers. I'm massively humbled by it. And I look forward to talking to you guys properly live in the chat during qualifying, during the race. And I will see you next time.